way to my left is Mark Easterling, Brody Walters, Corey Coleman. I'm Tim McCarthy. This is Barry Van Hoosen. We're three members of council. We make recommendations to the council as a whole. So that's kind of our role here tonight. And you're Jeff Blankard. Yes. We talked on the phone several times, never met. But welcome. You're in the right place. Is everyone okay with the March 2 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Moving on then. The rezoning requests on Westbrook. Brody, you reviewed this last night, so I mean, essentially, on the first two parcels, if I heard you right last night, that park zoning that it holds is really kind of an anomaly, or how would you say that again?
Yeah, basically what I observed back in 2007 on the zoning map, 2006, 2007, the zoning map was amended by the planning and zoning administrator at the time with a red Sharpie was indicating there's handwritten notes. I believe it was just an error. They took it from what was previously R4, which was our highest R value, which usually signifies multifamily or higher density, and that somehow lumped that into the park area, which I think is further south of that. So I think that was just an oversight of the red Sharpie, which inadvertently turned that into park zoning, which would be very unusual because of an existing building. It's not owned by the city. It didn't really make any sense. So I can only attribute that to being an error. So the request for both 940 and 950 would be to, I guess, revert those back to an existing category or existing use, which would be the R4 multifamily, and would make those structures then compliant with their zoning district as far as the use goes.
And I think, were you able to determine when those things were built? Those, I drove out there tonight before the meeting.
I believe one was 1970, one was 1971.
Okay.
So it's been some time.
Didn't trust me last night when I was saying that?
I couldn't remember what you said. I remember hearing a date, but I didn't write it down.
I think they're in my
Did you say that? How do you know?
Auditor site.
Oh, okay.
I don't trust myself.
Okay.
I trust other people's.
All right, and I think, Brody, you told us on all three of these rezoning issues, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended.
The first two, the one on 941 is different.
Okay, yeah.
So the 941, I guess we'll just kind of jump down to that because we'll probably consider these all together. 941 is a multifamily apartment building located on a single-family zoning lot.
Yep.
So that's on the other side of Westbrook, on the east side of Westbrook. The land use plan, as I showed in the maps and the staff report, call for that to be continuation of existing development patterns, which is shown as single-family residential. So my recommendation, which was unanimously supported by the Planning Commission to you, would be to have that remain as R3 single-family. The benefit to that, to doing it, any of these, is that the applicant, prior to purchase, was made aware of this deficiency, spoke to the buyer about that. I don't know if they negotiated a lower selling price because of the liability that the mismatch in zoning holds for those properties, but he did make that purchase with eyes wide open. Was planning to be here tonight, called us and said that he was not going to be here tonight, so I don't know what his thoughts are on what's going forward. Obviously, he'd like everything to match, but I certainly set the expectation that may not be a guarantee.
Does it grandfather the current structure in, and then it just is a replacement is basically what we'd be deciding?
Correct.
So even as is, it's legal non-conforming. Okay.
And what would cause that to be, you said, how much of a loss would need to incur through a hurricane or I should say tornado or whatever?
Yeah, it would be 60%. The other thing that could be at risk, and I can't imagine this happening, but if that multifamily unit would be, its use would be discontinued for a period of 2 years? Yes. Yeah, pretty sure it's 2 years, then it would lose its ability to fill those other spaces with tenants.
So who establishes the 60%?
The zoning code does.
No, in terms of how do we determine?
How do we determine that? That is typically done in conjunction with myself and somebody from the fire department, either the fire inspector or.
Okay.
You guys rely on insurance adjusters' opinions on that too?
It's not specifically spelled out as to how that would need to occur, but that's something we would consider as many factors as we had. Prior to that, it talked about 60% of the value. And we thought, well, if the most expensive part of the house burns down, but it's only 25% of the house, then you'd lose that right. So we attributed it, we changed that several years back to being actual quantity of the structure, not
Construction costs, per se.
Not even that. That's kind of more what it used to be based on, was construction cost. Now it's based on, an assessment of, 50% of the house is burned down or blown down. So it's perhaps a little harder to quantify. It's more of a qualitative analysis.
In there,
And that use, because it's kind of, those buildings are like, not duplexes, but like two twinplexes or something, I think.
So they're all connected. So we just consider it to be a 4-unit apartment building.
Okay, so that's the way the code defines it. And that's not permitted or in a C3 or a R3.
Correct. So for the time being, if it goes through and the rezoning is not successful and it remains R3, they couldn't enlarge the structure, they couldn't bring in a 5th unit. But they could continue to use it as 4-unit.
Okay.
would it make any sense at all to classify it as R5 so it could still be a duplex?
It exceeds 2-family unit though, so it's 4.
Well, I know, I'm just thinking of replacement, why, because that's really what we're considering anyway, is
Oh,
what you replace
Well,
it with.
I think if you remove the fact that we have a land use plan that's pending that suggests one thing, if we didn't have that, it's not unreasonable to say that could be an integration into a single-family neighborhood. But we have a plan now that kind of, although you haven't officially adopted it yet, but
Well, I guess what, part of what the plan identifies or what you kind of hear is that we're lacking rentals. Or multifamily housing, affordable housing, many different names. And so I guess that's what I'm approaching this as is, hey, this is something, a building that's existed for quite some time. I would assume we haven't really heard complaints about the existence of this multifamily, even though it is remarkably close to its neighbor. And the fact that she did not show up when given notice or call in, as far as we know, to object to its rezoning request.
and I did check today, and the neighbor would have received the notice, did not receive the staff report, so
Okay.
it didn't rely on necessarily a recommendation for an objection.
And it is kind of uniquely situated where if you look at just a parceling map, it looks like there's not much separation between the cul-de-sac behind it, but there is that creek that runs right beside it on the south. So I guess we have a need for rental units for families. This, to me, is probably what we consider a affordable housing unit in Perrysburg, or by Perrysburg's standards or definitions, especially where it's located. It's pretty conveniently located. I just hesitate to not allow it to continue to be used how it has been used for years and years. So,
And just to be clear, that not rezoning would allow it to continue.
right, yeah,
It's just
the replacement.
It's a risk.
My other concern is that if we go through, and we can certainly amend the land use plan to take that notch out of it.
Take a divot out of it.
Presumably, whatever we adopt, we should be, not working against, working towards. But like I said, we haven't officially adopted it yet, so I guess we're not going cross-grain on that yet.
And it's the same owner of all three, right?
It is, yeah, they were purchased as a package.
Okay.
Well, if you look at it in the broader context, though, of this diagram, I mean, it is in a sea of single family, so I don't know. I'm not inclined to overrule the planning commission unless there's a really compelling reason. But I take your point, though, Corey. Why change it? But
And I think, quite frankly, I'm not gonna go against the planning commission either. I don't think my mind is more brilliant than those six. it's just one of those things, I think we'd be remiss not to bring up that there is a rental shortage, an affordable housing shortage, and this is one of them.
Yep, you're right.
But realistically, my guess is this guy was willing to not be so concerned about losing or a potential loss here because he's grouped with two other buildings that are going to remain zoned residential multifamily. And I think our proposed land use plan makes a lot of logical sense. So
The other thing that I can mention too, if it gives you more comfort in this, is that while the land use plan would uniquely exclude this from multifamily, that particular house, the overlay that the proposed land use plan puts on the city as suggested zoning will probably afford areas that don't currently have the opportunity to introduce those types of uses. So we may be losing one actual, but the land use plan may create another 30 opportunities. So it may be still a net increase, even though if it's a loss today of compliance of one unit.
All right, well, any thoughts, Barry?
No, I agree
Okay,
with
what the planning commission did. Okay, then, we'll say all three rezoning, well, the first two rezoning requested, 940 and 950. We'll recommend approval of those requests to council. And on 941 Westbrook Drive, the committee's recommendation 3-0 will be to deny that requested rezoning. Moving on, then, update on historic district. I didn't know there was something going on with that.
That's just a really quick update from Brody and I. The historic district ordinance says that we will, by legal description and listing of properties, document what are the historic properties in the city of Perrysburg.
Okay.
And we have in the ordinance the legal description for the historic district. And some time ago, you all approved expanding that and taking that to city council. What we discovered, however, was that while the zoning maps have the Schaller building, the engineering building, the
Spafford House.
the Stafford House, and the property that has Fort Meigs on it as historic, they're not listed out in the ordinance itself the way they should be. So those, HLC thinks they're historic, Planning Commission thinks they're historic. We just have to have a public hearing to say, these are historic, make sure nobody objects to them, and then we'll add them, and then we'll take the whole thing to city council with those properties.
So
listed.
we just got the contiguous, I'm guessing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and somewhere along the line, those properties went into the zoning maps and never got properly put into the ordinance,
Into the text form.
into the text form of the ordinance.
So nothing is changing. All of these folks are aware that they are treated as though they're in the historic district because they are. It just is only memorialized on the zoning map with purple cross.
And they're not really in the historic district, they're
Satellite.
historic properties.
So it's basically just a house cleaning.
So this is a housekeeping
Just-
thing.
I mean, is this all another extension of that whole thing where the legal didn't match the real boundary or something?
That's what initiated this.
Okay.
That's what initiated us and made us discover that we did also, on top of the legal not matching the boundaries, these properties had never been listed like they should have been in the ordinance.
In the text.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're basically
I
saying.
mean, I know the
through-
Spafford House and,
They're not there. If you looked up the historic district code
yeah,
for the city of Perrysburg, these properties
Okay.
would not be there.
okay, I get that.
And they
All
should
they're
be.
saying is they did the review in the boundary, and then when they were reviewing the ordinance, they realized these islands had been left out of the actual ordinance itself, even though they've been treated as
So
part
are
of it.
these so-called listed properties as being in the district itself?
So there's two different things. So there's the district, which is like, you
Yeah.
draw a lasso around all the houses on front side.
Yeah,
And then, so that constitutes the district.
okay, gotcha.
And then there's listed properties, which fall under the jurisdiction of the Historic Landmarks Commission, but are not in the district.
Right.
And that's what these are referring to. So
And you got a long list there. I always thought the
No,
only
those are
listed
just
property.
parcels
Just parcel
of four
numbers. So they-
properties.
So it's a project
Spafford
site.
House, okay, yeah.
So we're
So this could be just an acre of
Yeah.
land for.
Right, it's just the parcel numbers that go with those. So they'll be listed by name, address, and parcels.
Okay.
It's-
descriptions
We
for
won't
those
do
or
legal
no?
descriptions for those because since they're by parcel, we don't need to do legal descriptions for those.
So this will then include the totality of the memorial, state memorial, right? From
Yes.
River Road,
Yes.
if you, not River Road, but.
Yes.
Okay.
Although, that's state property,
Well, I know, and
So-
that's why I wondered which is, how
they
that.
trump.
So when we do this, and this is more of a probably professional curiosity, when we do this ordinance denoting the historic district, do we record anything at the recorder's office with the in-lots reference so that, so say someone's doing a title search, they come up with,
I don't know that we have in the past, but we probably should because.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
Before somebody purchases a home, they,
should know it's restricted.
right.
Yeah.
What, I can tell you that people have found that in title searches before. I don't know how it got there.
There's probably a reference, but you will want it certainly for the new ones that
Right.
agreed to. So
Right.
Specifically Cariner's Club, you're gonna want that in there. Not that they're gonna transact that anytime soon, but it could be important for if it needs refinanced or.
Yeah, absolutely. It
other
seems like
purposes.
something that we should record just from a title search.
Yeah,
issue.
because what they'll do is they'll tag every one of those by the in-lot. So if you search that particular in-lot in our geo indexes, it'll reference ordinance, whatever, of 2022, listing this as a historical property. And me, as someone that does that sort of work, will look at it and I'll list that on a document that I send
Right.
to the bank, I send to the buyer of the house. So
Yeah.
it's like what I would do with a deed restriction in an
Yeah,
HOA.
sure, okay.
But I think it would be helpful. It gives another notice to potential purchasers.
So this is really just a cleanup. We're not treating any property differently. This doesn't change anything except the ordinance itself says that we will have the district and the listed properties, and we don't have the listed properties in it right now.
Okay,
And that's why I'm here this evening.
all right, sounds good. Is that, well, eventually there'll be an ordinance, Kate?
Yeah, we have the draft, and we have to do the public hearing May 3rd, everybody's favorite public hearing date.
Oh, my God.
And then we'll probably take it to the next May city council meeting.
We're gonna be dragging at that wastewater treatment plant toward the next.
Was that the?
Had I known, I wouldn't have suggested May 4th at 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, you can spend 8 hours here on the 3rd, then go do your tour.
Well, and then two hours afterwards. Down to my arms.
Huh. All right, then, last but not least, the land use plan update, and I know Jeff may have an interest in that. Brody, I guess, roughly an hour ago, to give a little, and I emphasize little, presentation on the more significant parts of the land use plan, apart from the heights, we talked about that multiple times, but we wanted to at least have an opportunity for discussion about the balance of the plan. And I think we're all kind of familiar with the focus areas, but Brody, do you want to go ahead with whatever you've rehearsed in the last hour?
Which admittedly is not a lot. This has been a long project, but what I provided with you, to you, 2 documents. One of them has a watermark there of March 24th, 2022 is the draft plan. Out of one of our last meetings, it was requested that we finalize our documents, start moving these things forward towards adoption. The version that I have here in front of you is what has been referred to as the Brody Plan, which does have consideration for Perrysburg Heights and the revised map that is associated with that I had presented. I didn't print out the one that simply removes the heights because obviously you can use your imagination and just delete those images from your packet. So those are the 2 that I guess we're prepared to move forward with. As you mentioned, Jeff is here with an interest in the American Steel Treating property. So what this land use plan was designed and intended to do is examine development patterns throughout the city. And most importantly, I would say it really comes down to documentation for one major map. And that is on page 45 of the non-presentation version. So everything that happens kind of before page 45 is a result of getting you to the product that page 45 offers. And that is the future proposed land use map of the city, which is, as the consultants have described it, is the city's blueprint for how and where they should grow now and in the future, will serve as a vision for future land use patterns to best position the city of Perrysburg as a thriving community in Northwest Ohio region. This also offers the city a unique benefit of being a legally defensible document when it comes to issues like we just considered for 941 Westbrook. Somebody comes, pushes back, claims that decisions are being made arbitrarily. This is a document we can have on record as saying, we are acknowledging prior to the introduction of any rezoning issue, any type of land use decision, how we'd like our city to grow. And the courts have upheld decisions based solely on prior planning on land use plans. So we did include Perrysburg Schools. We had a member of Perrysburg Schools on the steering committee, as well as Tim, you were on there as well. Brooke Price from Perrysburg Schools. We had council representation. We have developers and citizens, people who serve on our boards and commissions, did help participate in this. So a large portion of this, like I said, the real product is page 45. The case studies help create a visual as to what pages essentially 1 through 44 are talking about, some what I call best practices, demographics on our city. It outlines the needs, the wants. Yeah, I guess that's really what it is. It's needs and wants that got turned into the product, which is page 45. And then there's a direction on how to move forward and examining what the needs and wants could create in various portions of our city, which I believe there's 4 or 5 case studies, depending on how you look at it, which put real life examples on products that, based on our needs and wants, on surveys and citizen input, that we've essentially said that we've wanted. And I think page 45 fits those nicely and packages into certain places. So that is a very, very high level of 2 years worth of work.
Yeah. And let's, excuse me, talk about the focus areas. Just to refresh our memory about what we have. We've got, yep. Boundary crossing, which is the American Steel Plan, among other things. And I'm trying to find the map that, there we go. And maybe page 68 might tell us, but maybe you can explain what the plan recommended for that particular area.
Yes, and that is primarily going to be seen on page 71.
71?
Which is under the visioning portion of that. And I don't think Jeff's had the benefit of seeing this plan, so I'll just kind of read through it here for your benefit. It says the goal of revisioning boundary crossings to eliminate industrial manufacturing uses from an important historic neighborhood and to increase land use efficiency by adding mixed-use development to the southeast corner of Indiana and West Boundary Street. These buildings would include commercial businesses, retail, restaurant opportunities on the first floor and residential apartments or lofts above those. The building height would not exceed 3 stories and therefore would not visually overpower adjacent residential land uses. Streetscape would include parallel parking and a large sidewalk that allows access to building frontages. Parking would be between the buildings and the railroad tracks. Open space would also be considered behind the mixed-use buildings for outdoor dining, small events, and green space for residents. On the opposite side of the railroad tracks, the development of multifamily housing units will provide more residential capacity for the neighborhood. Additional parking for the residential units will be placed between the buildings and the railroad tracks. The residential units will be fronted by a large neighborhood park, which would not only facilitate the multi-unit family housing units, but the surrounding neighborhood south and east on the site. The park would be fronted on all sides with parallel parking to provide access to visitors. Boundary crossing can increase its value dramatically, especially if a strategy can be created to keep existing businesses in the city of Perrysburg and relocate them effectively. The pre-vision block will fit into the character of the existing neighborhood much more than the existing industrial facilities the watermarks, and is developed in a way that can seamlessly transition from a traditional single-family neighborhood to multifamily and mixed use on the other side of the railroad tracks. The increased density will provide consistent consumers for the mixed-use development, and in turn will help provide the existing neighborhoods with goods and services. And they've actually laid out some kind of geometry, you know, and there's some character images and things, you know, as well, showing, you know, the rhythm and the scale of what they're proposing. The land use plan, while it's intended to kind of secure uses and intent, the blocks, you know, the geometric layout of this is not designed to be concrete. There's flexibility to that, but it's just helping, you know, create a visual image for those when they read the text and ask themselves the question, what exactly is this getting at? So those are just designed to be helpful, you know, like what you see on page 73.
All right. There's a couple other, but I don't know, Jeff, if you want to say anything about that particular.
I'm trying to learn
Okay.
what the city's like. I have a potential buyer that has an use in mind that is not consistent with that. That's not industrial, but not consistent with that. And I was under the impression that the city was more comfortable with anything that was not industrial than if I pursued an industrial buyer. So I'm trying to learn what the city would consider and what the legalities are and everything else, because I need to unload this place. And I've avoided industrial because I know the guys across the street don't like it. They made that clear when I was there on a daily basis, and I know from discussions with the city, and I know if I lived there, I wouldn't like it. And truthfully, I would prefer as American Steel Tree, and that goes to somebody other than industrial. But I have a very good offer right now, and I have a buyer that has the feeling right now that their intended use would not be acceptable to the city. I have a lot of time and effort involved in securing this buyer. So that's where I'm at. I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to educate myself, I'm trying to figure out how everybody can get out of this. The only other serious offers I've had has been industrial.
Jeff, what I would like to offer to you is to have a copy of this land use plan.
Yeah, why
That
don't
would be
you
great.
make sure? Because there's about 6 pages of discussion in there.
Yep, it started on page 66. Yeah. Well, yeah.
So I'm a motivated seller. I'd sell it to the city, and that would allow the city to control what they would like to see. I won't give it away, but I'll sell it.
Well, I don't think we're in a position to buy it, but I mean, I give you credit though for trying to find a user other than industrial. I mean,
Yeah, I have some motivation to do that, other than just, it doesn't make sense that there's industrial property. And, you know, I spent 18 years talking to neighbors.
no,
These
yeah.
houses weren't as old as the plant, but you know, be a good citizen and a good neighbor and try to take care of them. But who wants to live across from an industrial site?
Okay, well, maybe this will give you some help in thinking about how you can market it.
If I go to, that's specifically why I did not list it, because it would get listed as an industrial site.
Okay.
So I've talked to brokers, realtors who would like to list it, but they'd like to list it as an industrial site. And that wasn't anybody's preferred path.
Yeah.
But the people that have been interested from a development perspective have not been interested in, at least not financially enough interested in that path. This path, what I understood prior to today, and maybe I have a better understanding now or after I review this. But those type of people were not interested in paying what the industrial and the current buyer are willing to pay.
Yeah.
None of which are equal to what the current owner paid to own the property 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The current owner is going to take a loss at this point on a real estate property.
Yeah, and I'll put Brody on the spot asking him what we asked during the planning process, not only this site. I mean, I can tell you, the steering committee that kind of got this thing was very excited about what this envisioned for that area. And we were at the downtown focus area, we'll talk about in a couple minutes, but we had discussion about now, is this really feasible, you know? Because where American Steel Treat is, that's green space.
Right.
And I don't know of any private developer who's gonna come in there and just volunteer to mow that lawn, you know, to buy your property and mow that lawn, but I think that, Brody, as I recall the discussion of the steering committee, these are like vision pieces of what you could do with that entire area. I mean, the coordination of the buildings and the green space could evolve over time. But that's the general purpose of a land use plan, is it's not a zoning map, these aren't site plans, for God's sakes. It's just kind of concepts about what would be a good use for the overall community for this particular site.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it as far as what the intent is. What I will say, and this is kind of what I explained to Jeff on the phone this afternoon, is that typically what will happen out of a land use plan process like this, and I will start out by saying Perrysburg has not been, I'm going to use the words aggressively proactive in effectuating land use plans in the past. But what would typically happen is if council felt comfortable with the vision and the concepts of saying some mixed use, commercial, whatever that is now, you have to understand that the current zoning of industrial would not allow that to even happen as it's shown or desired in this plan. So what really progressive communities will do, or aggressive communities, they will go through and they'll say, we subscribe to this vision, we like it, we think that adds value. After the adoption of this land use plan, they would go and effectively rezone that property, amend the zoning code to allow a developer to come in and, quote unquote, build the dream that the city has. Because the tools right now don't exist for that to happen. And they will only exist if you create them. So, Jeff's question to me this afternoon is, well, what's the identity of my property? What does this look like going forward? And I said, the only sure thing is that your property is zoned industrial now, and it will be for the next several weeks, several months, and possibly even longer.
Is it 6.5 acres?
Actually, it's 7, just over 7.
Okay.
There's a different owner for the half acre on one.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
And
I was gonna say,
The same owner, but a different LLC.
I mean, unless it's industrial, really I would imagine the only interest you're probably getting is someone that's willing to demolish it and put up an apartment building or something like that.
I've had some interest in that, but they're not financially motivated.
Yeah, it's tough.
So there's a lot of areas they can purchase for less cost and put up multifamily housing
Yeah,
away from railroad tracks.
yeah, that's another thing.
Good point.
So whoever might be interested, is it more of an institutional use?
It's a senior community or assisted living community. As I understand, with 100 beds. I know that from.
And so with this vision being multifamily, is it a density issue, Brody? Because
Well, it's a couple different issues. The city has typically looked at the senior living or the nursing home type things. Number one, the reports are saying that we're not necessarily underserved in senior living or nursing facilities. We are underserved in multifamily housing for individuals or families, whether that be through the quantity available or the age of the housing stock. So right away, it's not necessarily pushing us in the direction of a nursing home. But remind me what your question was?
well, if we look at multifamily, and those look like apartment buildings, and it could be senior family living, just by design, if you didn't know that they were called multifamily.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But obviously, this little denser population.
Yeah, I don't know that density is necessarily the problem. The city has always viewed nursing homes as being service heavy. You're not collecting income tax from the residents. The payroll on a lot of nursing homes is minimal. They're service heavy. And I think when you recognize that, you also recognize the fact that there has been a financial analysis done on the redevelopment proposal of that. This is the first time that the city has a property that's currently vacant and can set the stage for what I'll call, the first opportunity with the new land use plan. Creating those mixed use integrated things back in the neighborhood. A nursing home is kind of an island in of itself. It doesn't necessarily benefit from the walkability and the location of being close to the downtown and those certain elements. So it's, I guess the best words I can use is it's a less exciting use for the city and probably a lesser of a financial return, you know, when you consider that analysis, so.
Yeah, once upon a time, Barry, when the, what's the senior living next to John the 23rd?
St. Clair?
St. Clair. And then we had a senior housing unit go in over in the Harbortown area. And one of your predecessors named Joe Wallace. And he asked a question. We did an examination at that time. And the city, in terms of quantity of senior housing, I mean, I don't know who was that. You were here, Brody, then, I think.
I was, yeah.
We kind of did not a real scientific study, but it was a fairly convincing study looking at Sylvania, Maumee, Oregon, all the suburban Toledo area. And we were significantly oversubscribed on senior housing. And I remember Joe decreed at the time that the one in Harbortown, that'd be the last senior housing opportunity ever, but he didn't have that authority, but it was.
Somewhere along the line, we had Kingston, and then, is it Waterford?
Yes. And then now
So
River's Edge.
there's others that, so,
Now River's Edge Senior Living as well.
Yeah.
There's like 230 units
Out by Otterborn.
out by Otterborn.
yeah, I forgot about that one.
And then the one behind the Miller Valentine project in Harbortown that Tim was referring to, that was another one that popped up, that the Grubers actually went and built their own. I don't know that's exclusively senior, but that's who's living there, so.
Yeah, and that wasn't an assisted living type facility, as I recall. It was more an empty nester.
Yes, independent living.
So that's just history that
Right.
we felt, it's just, I guess, elaborating on what Brody said, that the analysis we did at the time was we're oversubscribed to, clearly the senior living in terms of assisted living, or, you know, step-down cares, or you're independent, that assisted, that nursing home. We had a strong inventory of that. I think there was always a niche in the middle we weren't sure about, empty nesters. Like you know, housing like you have now. And I think that housing would be, you know, fine in something like this. But if it's a more intensive care type facility, as Brody said, they're heavy service uses. So that was at least the thinking, but.
Understood.
All right, why don't we go on to downtown? This is the one that really kind of, well, that's Southbound train, I guess you can review for us there. I mean, that's just, again, page 77, I think, gives you really the vision for that area.
I did do my copy, but I know them well enough to chat about them, so. So you want me to talk about?
Yeah, just on South Mauser, we were just kind of redeploying the commercial uses. I think is the way I describe it. I don't know if that's accurate, but it was to make it a little bit more organized, a combination of uses.
Yeah, I would say that residential was a large component of this where it is.
Oh,
not-
that's right, that's
where it is
right.
not currently.
That's right.
So again, you know, in order to sustain increased commercial activity or make it justifiable to relocate, construct new buildings, we need the captive audience of the residential. So you'll notice a lot of the yellow boxes now represent that. The purple boxes are roughly the same amount of retail space that currently exists, just a reconfigured way of doing that, which kind of activates the streetscape, provides a different look where you don't just have the seas of asphalt out front. So it's a little bit more of an urban look, more dense, but it's also more well-rounded with a mixture of residential and commercial.
Now, in this residential that's envisioned here, this isn't single family. Again, this looks like multi-use or multi-unit.
One of the things that we don't currently have and would be a proposed follow-up to a land use plan is to say, what does it take, if you subscribe to the land use plan, what does it take to accomplish these things? And it requires things that we don't currently have, tools, zoning classifications. We could create new zoning classifications. mixed-use commercial. You could spell out percentages of residential, commercial that you'd be looking for in those things. But we need to create the environment that allows developers to come in and see the city's vision, know that it has the tools and resources in place so they can come here and not have to go through a year and a half of discussion of creating those new
Creating
classifications.
zoning class, yeah.
It's painful enough for them just to come to rezone to a zoning classification that we already have, let alone creating a new one. Because one thing I've learned since being here is that aggressive developers value time more than they value money. And money might not even be a secondary issue. It's a third or fourth or fifth issue for them, but it's all about timing. They're there to outcompete other folks. They're there to time
Yep.
construction costs, construction seasons, are short in Ohio, so that's very, very important to them. So as much as we can set the table for them and say, you have everything you need, just do it. That's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
It's currently just one owner, right? On both sides?
South boundary. Actually, Barry can probably speak to that a little bit better. It's, the one side is.
Tolson owns one side, and then there's 13 of us on the other side. So it's a lot of owners.
So it's parceled up?
Yeah.
Okay, so they did like shared wall parcel splits?
Correct. They're basically villas.
Gotcha. Well, that makes it
Complicated.
a little more complex than, because you're buying the buildings in essence. I know you're getting the land under it, but you are in a lot of ways buying the building as it exists.
And there's a developer that's just bought about 40% of it. So he has his own set of plans for it as well. And he's familiar with this.
Is that the
Corridor
corridor?
location or?
No, on the
Other
Country
side.
Charm side.
Oh.
So I know I've shared that with Brody.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept. I really like the repurposing of the streetscape that you're seeing
Yeah.
versus the parking. Not a knock on where Barry's currently at, but I mean, it is a asphalt
It's a 1950s.
field, yeah.
It's a 1950s structure.
Sure,
Yep.
Sure.
And I will tell you that the developer that Barry is referring to is very excited about this and saying, how do we make this happen? I hear from him once a week saying, where are we at with this? How do we make this happen? He's very energetic, apparently has the horsepower to do the work, so.
Good, maybe.
But it may require more work on our part than it does his part. Because
Yeah, because we don't have the zoning category, I think. I mean, you said that earlier, and now it's sinking into me. We don't, I mean, this is kind of what we went through on Levis at that time.
Exactly.
We didn't really have any of those tools at our disposal. Now, fortunately, we had players through Larry that could hold the property and hold the site, and they could wait. In that case, there was time available to do what we needed to do, but it took some gyrations to get it.
And it seems like you almost need to do that with the project, with the first focus area. We just talked about it as well with the integrated use of the commercial and because I think that's a little more than the office and service, which has pretty much gone out of existence, so. Have you, again, to put you on the spot, but have you guys, has your office begun drafting what those potential zoning districts might look like?
we have not, that is probably something that a second RFQ would go out with a consultant and we
Okay.
sit down and.
Yeah, because I think having an action plan so that I think you're absolutely right. This only happens if you give them, you take away all the hurdles. I mean, would be the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And I don't want to see you guys have to take that job on.
Well, right,
That's a
yeah.
perfect consultant job to, I mean, even with the consultant, it takes a lot of your time. All right, then, where's the downtown piece?
So it's called Southbound, Downtown? Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, page 80.
Okay.
So the biggest notable difference with this one,
Yeah.
this page here, is you'll notice that kind of the beloved Commodore green space
Mhm.
there on the southeast corner of Indiana and Louisiana. I was proposed to, again, activate that streetscape by pulling, commercial buildings, could be apartments up above, storefronts down below, an extension of our downtown, to more fully integrate that into the downtown. Right now, a lot of people don't.
That's the school property, right?
Correct, yeah, that's
School
shown
administration
here
building, yeah.
in that kind of backward 7 purple building. That's where it's currently at. The idea is to stretch Louisiana down, give it the same consistent look and height and kind of rhythm of the buildings down there. And flip-flop the existing Commodore green space for where Perry's Landing's at now. There's some kind of back alley pedestrian accesses here, but to center this more with the library and to have this be a functional part of the downtown. I hear from a lot of people that they believe that our downtown doesn't start until you go over the railroad tracks. And our idea, as part of this, part of the motivation is to really draw that down and make that start as far south as we can. And that's the scenario of about 5th Street.
No. As far as making these a reality, because it goes with the first focus group that we talked about too, of getting rid of that steel plant, we're putting it as a park district, right?
Yeah, Perry's Landing's becoming a green space.
Yeah, so like, what is the action plan as far as the city? Because we are basically in this plan saying we're interested in acquiring property. We're certainly not anticipating donations of land. I think it would be unfair. So what do we need to do to take what's here and make that a reality? And how much money do we need to be setting aside to make? Because, right now, we have something that's in this plan that's denoted as a park, or a potential park district, which would be city property. So to me, that's step one. I really think the city should be interested in purchasing that if we're buying into this land use plan. I'm not saying we do have the tools. So how do we bridge those two ideas?
And that was the same thing I expressed to Jeff earlier. That's what progressive cities would do, is they'd hold it and they would market it as, here's our vision, here's the tools, who's going to come and do it? And you'd have people bidding on that, basically.
Right, and I think if we're going to adopt a plan like that, we should have action plans for the expansion of our park districts. Because that's what makes every one of these focus areas has a park, I believe, integrated somehow, except for the crossings. I think even the Heights initially had a park. So it's showing that, and that's, to me, when you're looking at that, that's what makes that focus area somewhat desirable in the imaging. So it's a prime example of like, how do we set that up? So we have a piece of land that's for sale and not necessarily buyers that we want to accommodate, which really puts you in a rock and a hard place, right?
Corey, you remember Parks and Rec, I was lamenting how the city has always been reactive to the park environment. I don't know of one park that the city has actually purchased and built, because it's donated by the Stranahan's or donated by, we'll say, by the schools because of the soccer fields and then our green space. We just aren't proactive in that way for whatever reason. And this would be a way we could be.
Well, I would fully support
Whether it's
looking
Jeff's or
into
here.
purchasing that. I would be on board with looking into that. I don't know that that's necessarily this committee or whether we do actually have the war chest to do that. But it's, to me, sounds like we've been spoiled as far as parkland goes.
Well,
Especially if we're going to be this aggressive in planning for future land use plans and including parks and all.
those same questions came up at the steering committee, Corey, and I can tell you, Aaron, and maybe Mark has a memory of it, but Aaron started talking about, economic development programs that may exist, but it got kind of sketchy as to what those are. Because we had the same conversation. Well, are we going to go to Bob Mauer and say we're going to take your Perry's Landing by eminent domain and start talking about purchase price, or are we going to go to American Steel Street and buy them? And the steering committee certainly isn't in the business of spending the city's money, but I don't know how you get there on some of this stuff if it isn't the city doing a part of it.
I think you almost have to do the heavy lifting, the first move I think in part it is creating these new friendly zoning descriptions for developers. But realistically, if we're going to we got to put our money where our mouth is too,
So,
to
Tim,
a certain extent.
When a developer decides to build out a home residential development, there's always a requirement for some allocation for green space or for money. And then And that is a funding source.
Mhm.
If we actually would, instead of requiring them to do a sliver of land within their little development,
But,
with a swing set and a walking path, and actually then collect those resources financially, so we could then have a funding for something like that. Because Jeff's not gonna give it to us for free, and the school isn't gonna give it to us for free if we talk about these green spaces, right?
well, didn't the school offer it at one point
No,
for like
they would-
$1?
No way. Absolutely not.
Well, you could.
Back when
Yeah,
the,
that's it. They're not gonna do that.
Yeah, we-
no, I mean, that's, maybe
What people would say about that.
I'm
Well, that
talking
funding exists.
years and years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's a funding source.
No, and
because-
I, quite frankly, talking about that, the reserve for parkland within these subdivisions, we need to get rid of the land requirement, setting aside land, because all we're getting is grass patches and.
Correct.
You're better off, I mean,
Well, do you remember the number on that, in that, I forget what we call it, but in the 10% fund where the developer can contribute money, and it seems like it was
Park
a
develop-
couple
park
hundred
development
thousand,
I think there was, if I remember right, like 300,000
no more than I thought.
in that. But another tool that I believe the city has that's either not used or completely underutilized is the CIC. Sometimes that will be pumped in,
Mhm.
and budgeted over time, and you could have a balance of $1 million on a CIC. And go out and acquire properties, turn that over, then you replenish that CIC with that. So that's a way that can happen.
Mhm.
So as part of the budgeting process, we look at funding the CIC, which is Community Improvement Corporation. But I can tell you on this particular case study, the downtown, we've been contacted on more than one occasion by a developer out of Sylvania that did Somo Flats. I can't think of his last name. He is very, very interested. And he said, I would love to do this project. This is everything I'm about.
The developer did what project?
The Somo Flats in Sylvania.
Oh,
And he looked at this plan here with our consultant and said, I would love to do this almost exactly as you have planned. But we had to tell him, well, we don't really have the pieces in place yet, and there's the obstacle there of the owner here. And he goes, well, that's what I work out. But he's like, do you have different incentives that we can use, tax abatements? Do you have the tools and the zoning in place? And we said, we're not there yet. And he goes, well, you let me know when you are.
it wasn't McGowan, right? We shared the name at some point, I can't remember who it was, but, All right. Barry, put your former school board member cap on. How do you think the schools would feel about this?
Well, back when we actually tore the building down, there were some options to build row houses and townhouses that would have been really cool. But the school felt as though that wouldn't be politically viable, just because people wanted to, if we were gonna tear the building down, at least get some green space out of it. So that's where it's been ever since.
Yeah.
So, it's a valuable piece of property.
Sure.
So it is, but I'm not sure they could give it up without it being replaced by something.
Yeah, I mean, this would envision a whole bunch of commercial development down there.
Which
And
is,
that might economically.
which was
be
one of the
viable.
options, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I like the use it has now, which is a real contributor to the downtown. now.
We need green space downtown. We need green space downtown. Yep.
well, and I don't necessarily disagree with this type of green space. I just, every time I look at this, I always think it's more practical to have the park we're designing where there is a torn down, the green space where the car show is already, and do the same, just shift it. Because I don't think you're gonna get that land from Bob Mauer while he's at 100% occupancy and not dealing with a lot of maintenance over there, I don't think. I know it's getting older, but I don't think he has any occupancy issues on any of those buildings.
Yeah, but the plan does make sense, because see, the other thing I remember from the discussion, this little thing here is a little walkway, like a pedestrian type connector, so you can have this stuff down here, again, commercial with residential behind, you've got this pedestrian walkthrough, and then we talked about extending that, up past Third Street near,
Inside the 5, all the way.
inside the 5 and all that.
This was a parking garage, the gray block.
That's right, I forgot about that. Because I remember Aaron saying, and I think he's right, that even with everything we've tried to do for parking downtown, it's still an issue.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Well, could you even do a green space on top of a parking garage?
not as usable, I don't think. You're gonna haul your kids up there.
I don't know, I'm just saying, high enough in Perrysburg, you got a nice view of that river, I'm sure.
That's true.
It's not gonna be ugly.
Yeah, 3 stories up. But, I don't know, it's an ambitious plan. It'd be nice to see that happen, but there's a lot of hurdles to making that get there, but I don't know, as a vision piece, I'm okay with it, despite all those.
I really like the vision, I don't want that to get lost in what I said. I really just think we need action plan, being proactive. Barry captured it perfectly. What do we need to do to be proactive? Because if we're aggressive about it, I think the rest of the dominoes fall in place. I think if you put up a green space, that real estate instantaneously, it's valuable already.
The perimeter gets pretty.
Oh my goodness, yeah. For developers, whether it's commercial or residential, then if you add in new zoning classifications where you can mix the two of them,
Yep.
and people are getting new buildings in a close to downtown area in a park, you're gonna kill it. And I think if the city makes a first step, you're gonna see that happen, so.
It's a domino effect, and I will say, even with Jeff in the room, as you start to see which direction this plan is going, if I were on city council, I would be looking to initiate a rezoning of American Steel Trading property prior to a sale. That way you can at least start things in the direction perhaps that are more appropriate than, because, and again, Jeff's in the room, but I would be trying to block that industrial sale. Because you're going to guarantee yourself a user for the next 20 or 25 years that is not going to be consistent with that. So every day that you lose is a day that somebody comes in there and rightfully buys a property they have every right to buy with a use that is current. So you want to make that window of opportunity as short as you can.
Then I need to say that the city needs to act quickly if they want something other than industrial. Because I'll say with Brody in the room, I've given that comment, I will be proceeding quickly to sell that as an industrial property so that I can do the best service I can in the company I'm working for.
Yeah,
Which makes total sense.
that's your
And
job.
I totally respect that opinion too. We're just coming at it from different angles, so.
Understood.
Um,
But if the city, I don't see how the city's gonna make all this come together if they're not proactive.
How,
Because you got 3 business properties and 4 residences and boundary draws.
has there been any kind of conversations with the mayor or the administration on this?
I talked to them in June of 2020.
But not since?
Apparently, this land use plan was not as firm at that point. Because at that point, I left with that meeting, with the Zoom meeting, of course, at that time, but left that meeting with the understanding that anything short of industrial would be strongly considered by the city. Now, obviously, there's some things I wouldn't pursue, but I thought that this particular option was fine. I've got 3 months in arranging this deal and holding the owner up or listing it to make this deal come together.
Yeah.
Now, that buyer has a very strong impression that that's not feasible.
Yeah.
So I'm making a last-ditch effort to see is that feasible or not? And then, especially based on what I'm learning here tonight, if that's not feasible, I'm gonna proceed quickly to sell it as an industrial property. I have no other choice. I've got an obligation to my employer. And I do like what the city's trying to do. I'm not a resident, but I like what the city's trying to do. But that may not be in the best interest of my employer, and that's how I'm paid.
Are they interested in parceling off any of it? Do you know? Not necessarily. I'm just thinking if the city doesn't.
We would listen to anything.
Okay. That's what I want to know.
But the ultimate goal of the owner is to dispose of it all,
Okay.
and quickly. It was only the interest of pursuing a non-industrial use
Right.
that has a still at owning it. I mean, it's between $10,000 and $11,000 a month in holding costs.
And I'll tell you I'm not the person that makes this decision. I don't know, but I'm looking at the two parcels we're worried about are where the plant sits, right? So you don't necessarily want to pay for the vacant land next to it unnecessarily if you're going to do something like a park, because that can be valuable and alienable land on its own. So that's why I was asking that question. So
If I'm frank, I would say the city is not probably gonna move quickly.
I don't think you're incorrect.
If this current buyer walks, I can sell it quickly. Nobody's gonna like it. I mean, I don't want that to be a threat either.
You have a job to do.
Intentionally avoided industrial people. Not that I won't talk to them because they were a fallback position, but I have intentionally avoided those opportunities in terms of a sale. Well, I spent months pursuing this particular buyer to get the price that the owner wanted, to get conditions that everybody was happy with, blah, blah, blah. And we signed a letter of intent 2 weeks ago. They approached Brody last week, I guess. And now they have a very strong opinion that the city is not amenable to that use. They called me, said, Jeff, here's where we're at. You think you can do anything? I said, well, I can't fight City Hall, but I'll go to the world. And that's why I'm here tonight.
You specifically said when it comes to multifamily apartment buildings, that the pushback was that it was next to a railroad. Did you have that feedback?
I had that feedback. Also, I didn't have a lot of people. I didn't list it, so people weren't pounding down my doors trying to buy it. But I did talk to one individual that I think was pursuing that kind of avenue, and he was willing to pay about half of what my letter of intent is. And I had industrial users that were in between there, one almost as much as the current buyer.
And Jeff, without giving away, your private information, are you able to describe the type of industrial users? Maybe not the companies, but I mean.
One is a local company in Perrysburg. I think he's probably had to go another option at this stage of the game. One, I'm not 100% sure because I was pretty far into the current guy, so I took some information and said if this falls apart, I'll get back in touch with you. And another one was basically used equipment.
Okay. Well,
So I don't know that this is the place that this gets resolved.
no.
It doesn't get resolved here, but it can be the start of potentially a conversation, I think. So.
But I think Brody's already given you a signal, or given your potential buyer the signal. That's not going to be a highly favored transaction.
Yes.
I
guess
and I hate to say that, I don't know, do you have to go to Plan B and market it industrial?
And I'm here saying a couple of things, many of which I've said already, but one that I don't think I have. It's given two options. Does the city prefer industrial?
Yeah. No,
Over
we
the other.
don't, but I don't think we have the mechanism right now to get you what you need in terms of, we certainly aren't in a position to buy it.
No,
Yeah.
but if the options are approve the current buyer's zoning request, and zoning ain't my thing, so I don't even know what that needs to be, but approve that or send me away pursuing an industrial user.
No, that couldn't be answered here, because if you change the zoning, it's got to go to the planning commission. And so it's zoned industrial now, right? It'd have to be, I don't know, what zoning would it have to carry to allow senior housing in there even?
Probably the RM multifamily.
Yeah.
So I just asked Brody, if you were to, you said you hadn't listed it, so you haven't really shopped it. If our land use plan supports a potential rezoning, do you think listing it even as industrial with a city-supported rezoning tag on there, that you could draw some other attention outside of industrial?
I think I talked to people that were familiar with Perrysburg's land use plan.
With this land use plan?
I don't know about this particular version. This seems to be a newer version than what I've seen.
And I only say that because the older land use plans don't necessarily support multifamily in that area versus this
I did
one.
talk to one individual, a developer type individual, who was confident that you would approve multifamily mixed use type of environment. He did not feel he could make money. The price that he was willing to pay, I guess, I don't know what his thoughts were about paying money, he obviously wants to, but the price that he was willing to pay was nowhere near what I could get either industrial or with this current option. So I'm not saying, I guess the honest answer to your question is yes, I believe that I could probably get interest if they understood what your intent was. But I don't believe I would be doing justice to my employment by taking those offers, because they're significantly less than other offers that I've had. And none of this got put down on paper, letters of intent, it didn't go that far with these other options. But that was an advantage of some of the other options that I had as well. They were willing to move quickly. So the current option has got a lot of time baked in that they can take to walk away from this or apply all the money towards a purchase price. Well, I continue to pay holding costs. I've got other options that would happen, that would close much more quickly to get those holding costs off my back. Therefore, I can afford to take significantly less money from them. But the people that were offering the lease were people that I believe were more in line with the city's intent, as I understand it.
Okay. Well, maybe this will help Jeff in part just to see the timeline going forward. I mean, the plan as a whole has got to go to council. We've got to connect with the Heights on some schedule. You guys have any thoughts on how you want to do that? I mean, we could take it up at our meeting in May and then try and settle with whatever we're going to settle on the Heights, and then talk about moving it on to council. It'll probably be sometime this summer.
So the next Heights meeting is gonna be at council, right? That was my understanding.
It could be, I suppose.
Not May 3rd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why not?
Wait,
I mean, at this point, we'll set up cops, but please not May 3rd.
Yeah, no, it's not gonna be May 3rd. And
I ran into Paul the other day, and I know from the small conversation I had with him, he was thinking there would be at least a month notice.
yeah.
Or right around, given enough time so
Yeah.
that they can.
You know, just to circle back to that, there is the Brody option, there's the removal option, and then there's the option where we just keep that jagged edge and lock it in.
No,
Well, in terms of our conversation, I
yes,
know that's not an official option.
right.
I understand.
The only two drafted options are the
Yes.
Brody option and the removed option.
So,
Well, I think the other one needs to be drafted as well. I think it's gonna be important that that's at council. I think we actually talked about that in the last meeting, that is going to be prepared to be talked about as well.
It's
because
not-
this,
They would be the author of their own plan. And when they said, well, we'll draw
Yeah,
our own plan. They'll have to draft.
That was a split between the
we're almost
two.
ready to take it to council if we're
Um,
okay.
Administration has not drafted a third plan.
I don't think it's really I think all you have to do is staple in that, the expanded map that we had that shows how it currently sits, to be honest with you. Because that was my impression, is that was also going to be discussed in front of the entire council. That would not, if my recollection is correct, we took a vote on leaving them out of the plan altogether, that was approved. They were recommended 3-0. It was 0-3 against the Brody plan, and it was also 0-3 against leaving, or doing the jig-jag line, I don't know what you would call
Several
it.
years from now, we're gonna have to reference you doing this.
Yeah, like the, but, I was under the impression all three of those will be discussed. I think we should be prepared for that. I think it should be in a plan that's ready to adopt, because then I will speak for myself, that's partly why I read the current zoning code for the Heights, because it's very similar to our multifamily, which acts as a buffer to single-family residential, and is something that's characteristic that we would put adjacent to commercial.
Okay, then I would ask that the three of you make the motion, because right now, all the administration has been asked to do is create the removals plan and the Brody plan, so you officially ask us to draft that third plan.
Well,
But that's the Heights plan.
yeah.
It's not, right?
I think we should be prepared for it. I don't think we need to speak to it. I think it should be an option that is prepared to be examined that night and potentially adopted. I think we'd be foolish not to have that ready.
Then do
Well-
you want to have that ready?
Hold on. I think what we need to do is have a committee of the whole of council to include the Heights, the balance of the plan, and spend one meeting just talking about that.
I think that's,
That's fine.
And then from there, we can make a decision on the Heights and the rest of the plan. And then at this, a succeeding council meeting, the administration can develop whatever it is a so-called final version of this, including the Heights, including the focus areas. And I don't want it to be a lot to spring us all on council in one night, although a lot of us are really familiar with it now, but some of us aren't. And haven't really had a chance to talk about it and think about it, so I think that's probably the way we need to go. So I think what we do at the next meeting of council, we set a committee of the whole meeting date. We need to give some advance time, because we did make a commitment to Paul in the Heights. We wouldn't, I think 30 days was kind of an optimal time period, but
I think as long as you're given a couple weeks' notice, you're gonna be.
yeah, I think if we're a few weeks out, that should be fine.
So as I understand your plan, you want to have on the agenda for April 19th, schedule committee of the whole to discuss land use. And at April 19th meeting, you all will pick a day for that plan.
Yeah, it'll come out of my minutes.
Okay.
The minutes will say that we intended to ask council to set a committee of the whole meeting date.
Okay, and I'll put that as one of your action items, just so. it's there.
Yep, that's fine.
Would you like to have Aaron Dominy and Tim Bach-Brader president at the committee of the whole meeting?
Yeah.
I will be gone for that, where we're setting that meeting, so I'll be gone on the meeting for the 19th.
Okay.
And then I'll just let this committee know I plan on abstaining from the Heights portion of that conversation.
That's right, I remember. You said that. Okay, that's what we'll do. Nothing, any other business to come before us tonight? If not, we're adjourned.
So, Mark, Brody, will we relinquish this? Are we now dealing with just these two?
Positive about a park, because
Yeah.
I said everything is all
That or